player one, or sorry, if player two goes there, player one, let's see. Yeah, they play like that. All right, case 4, if player 2 goes there, we sort of play it out, and each time forcing the move and then putting them into a pincer. All right, so I think game 1's really not too bad to analyze as long as you keep yourself organized and sort of work out each case, using the symmetry whenever possible to sort of cut down on your work. All right, so that's game 1. Game 2, we have 9 cards, each with some word on it. All right, players take turns removing a card, and what their goal is to get 3 cards, all of which have the same letter. All right, so that's the objective. And so today we're going to be talking about a lot of different ways to not only solve games, but to also do problem solving. And so our strategy for this one is we're going to find a game that's almost identical to it. So we noticed that maybe like in tic-tac-toe, right, in the standard like 3x3 grid, you want to get 3 in a row. We know there's 8 winning lines. And maybe after analyzing this one, looking at all the different ways you can win, you notice that there's also 3 ways you can win, or 8 possible ways you can win. Right, you look at the A's, you want to write them down. Right, look at the E's, there's 3 words that have E's in it. H's, there's 3 words that have H's in it. O's, R's, S's, T's, and finally the W's. So if you write all these down, you can, I know just because there's 8 lines doesn't necessarily mean it's the same as tic-tac-toe, but if you rearrange them like this, then all of a sudden this game is identical to tic-tac-toe, right? We say it's isomorphic to tic-tac-toe, which means, right, the word isomorphic means identical in every way except maybe appearance. So the rules of the game may be different, the chips of the game may be different, the way you win might be different, but it's essentially still the same game. So if you were to play this game and place these things in this exact configuration, this is exactly tic-tac-toe. And as many of you probably already know from playing tic-tac-toe or X's and O's, this game always ends in a draw if both players play well. So, yeah. All right, so game 3. Oh, yeah, I think we can just skip this slide. All right, so game 3. I think game 3 is the first pretty interesting game. I like this one. So this one you have a 3x3 grid along with 8 counters. You place the counters on the board like this, and players take turns removing 1, 2, or 3 counters, provided they all lie in the same row or column. And also, the counters have to be adjacent. There's actually another game where you rescind the condition that they have to be adjacent. This gives you a completely different game, which is also really interesting. So if you're interested in this one, I encourage you to try that one. Just take away the condition that they have to be adjacent, and you get a really nice game out of it. As for this one, though, we have that condition that they're adjacent. And so if you remember kind of what I was saying earlier about using symmetry to make your life easier, cut out cases, this problem is a perfect example of that one. We want to use symmetry as much as possible to sort of do as little work as possible. So in this game, it turns out that a second player has a win. Maybe surprisingly, I think a lot of people thought that this one was a 1-player win game. But we look at all of the, let's see, there's 12 non-equivalent moves the first player can do, and all we need to do is go through each one of them. Right? If you look at each possible move individually, you're going to be here forever, right? So you will need to use symmetry to cut out your work. So the first moves are shown up there. All right. And so we just need to go through each one of these, but this really isn't too bad, right? The first 4 are actually pretty easy because you can cut in half such that it makes two individual groups of 1x2s. So, let's see. All right, so first board you make that move, you can make that move, you can make that move, or you can make that move, and you get, right, two distinct groups of 2x2s. That's for the first board. And at this point, all you need to do, I think at this point it's clear that you can win because whatever the next player does, you can just do it on the opposite 1x2 board. And eventually you will win. For the next two, you do something very similar, but instead of breaking them into two 1x2s, you break it up into two sort of L shapes. So I'll show you. You take the one, and the next one you take the one in the middle, and you make this L shape, which gives you two distinct boards, and you do the exact same thing as before, where you just copy their move on the other one. So, all right, so yeah, thereafter you just play symmetrically to the other one. All right, so for the remaining boards, it's really not, the next four boards really aren't too bad. All right, so the next four you can break up into a 2x2. So there would be your move for the next four boards. So you break, yeah, so you can turn it into just a 2x2. And at this point, it's not too hard to see that you'll be able to win. Right? If they take two, you can just take the last two and win. And if they only take one, then you can take the opposite corner. So if they take this one, you can just take the opposite corner. All right. So that's it for those ones, and we have two boards left, and these are the really tricky ones. So for these ones, this is the move that you make. So this one's definitely the hardest one to remember. But as long as you can remember this shape, you should be able to always win. All right, if you make this move, right, then I don't think it's clear yet why you still win in this position, or it's not really clear why this is a losing position yet. But if we just look through the 5 possible responses, or 5 possible moves that the player can make from this one, I think you'll see that you win. So, right, if they take the corner, if they take the bottom one, if they take the middle one, if they take, let's see, I guess the middle two, or if they take the other middle two. All right, so these are the only different boards. These are the only boards that that your opponent is able to make, and each of these, I think it's not too hard to see that you can win by making two distinct 1x1s. All right, so maybe we'll just show that there. Yeah, so since we dealt with only 12 possible starting moves player 1 could make, and we show that in every case player 2 can bring out their strategy. So this is enough to say that we have solved game 3. All right, let's look at the next one. So game 4 is really important to talk about because we get to talk about 2 problem-solving strategies which are really important. So the way that we play this one is we have this funny shape along with 15 counters. All right, let's see. Players take turns removing 2 adjacent counters until eventually nobody can make a move, and whoever can make a move loses. All right, so in this game, the second player can win, but so kind of similar to what so the 2 things that we're going to do, the first one, to make it easier to deal with, is we're going to rearrange the game board to something that's a lot easier to deal with. Right, this funny shape really doesn't mean anything to actually playing the game, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to stretch it out and that'll make it a lot easier to really tackle this thing. So for convenience, we change this to a 1x15. And also for convenience, instead of taking away 2 things from a full board, we're going to imagine placing 2 counters and exactly 2 counters on an empty board. And so that's just to make it a little bit easier to describe the game. Right, so when you're solving problems, don't be afraid to transform it to an isomorphic game and solve that one. After all, if you can solve the isomorphic game, the strategy carries over. Okay. So that was what I said before. Instead of removing, or we place them on. So that's the first important thing that we're going to do, which is a nice problem-solving strategy beyond just analyzing games. The second one is also extremely important. I know that my guys know that I try to push this a lot, but we're going to downsize the problem, right? Instead of looking at a 1 by 15 board, we're going to look at a 1 by n board for small values of n. And usually in general, when you're doing problems with very large numbers, it really helps to downsize the problem. Look at a few small cases, look for a pattern, look for something, and try to get a general story. In this one, we're not going to find the general solution for n. I think that's way too hard. But downsizing still really helps us with this problem, as we'll see in a little bit. So we'll look at n equals 1 first. This is a very trivial case. N equals 1, second player wins automatically. Player 1 can't place their 2. The other trivial case is 1 by 2 and 1 by 3. This one's player 1 wins. They just play where they can and nobody else can fit. So maybe when you're solving a game like this, it actually probably helps to make a table, right? So you might want to make a table, one column for n, one column for who wins. And I think this will really help if it'll make solving this game a lot easier if you were to do it on your own. The next case, when n equals 4, is our first interesting case. So 1 by 4 board, player 1, not try to see, player 1 can win by placing it in the middle. But also importantly, but maybe doesn't seem important now, but a player 1 can also force player 2 to win by placing on the side. So like that, right? If player 2 plays on 1-2, they force player 2 to win. And this is important, right? It may seem kind of silly to talk about it now, but as we'll see later, this is a very important point to remember. Okay, so 1 by 5. 1 by 5, player 1 wins no matter what. Or sorry, player 2 wins no matter what. Sorry, I messed that up. Yeah, player 2 wins no matter what. No matter where player 1 goes, there's always a place for player 2, which means the second player wins automatically. On a 1 by 6, very similar to the 1 by 4, the first player gets to pick whether they win or lose, which is a lot stronger than just being able to win. 1 by 7 and 1 by 8, first player can win, but if they don't choose to win, then player 2 gets to pick whether they win or lose. So these ones aren't so great. You don't necessarily want to get a 1 by 7 or 1 by 8. All right, so I'm not going to go over these ones. I think they're not too bad to go through. It's very similar to earlier. The one I will go over is the 1 by 9. So on this one, the second player can always win. So let's look at all of the possible first responses by the first player. So black is first player, and then the white is second player's response. So these are all the ways player 1 can go, and the winning move for player 2. So I guess really, regardless of where player 1 goes, player 2 always plays in 6-7. And I think it's not too hard to see that player 1, or sorry, that's not hard to see that player 2 will always win these games, right? There's always a 1 by 2 and a 1 by 3 left over, which means player 1 wins, player 2 wins no matter what. All right, so that's one good thing to keep in mind. I think we're ready to jump to the 1 by 15. All right, so let's look at the 1 by 15 board. There's 7 non-equivalent opening moves. And so similar to last time, we'll show the winning move for the second player. So these are the 7 moves. It's a little bit trickier than the 1 by 9. All right. But now when we get to actually analyzing why this works, now the fact that we had downsized it earlier becomes very, very useful. Right, so for example, I think in the second and the fifth board, second and the fifth cases, it was all that's left over that you can play on is a 1 by 9. We already solved the 1 by 9. We know for sure the second player wins on this board, which means these cases are done automatically. Like these are the easiest cases. All right, So those guys are done. We know for sure player 2 wins based on our previous work. All right. All right, and this one is the hard case. All right, notice we have a 1 by 3 left over and a 1 by 8 left over. So we need to look at a couple of cases, right? If player 1 plays on the 1 by 3, then player 2 just plays to win on the 1 by 8, right? We had that, right? So maybe I'll explain the rules again as a reminder. So this one has 3 rows, right? 1 row with 3 counters, 1 row of 4, 1 row of 5. Players take turns removing 1 or 2 counters that have to be adjacent, and the last player to take a counter wins. All right. What this means, because you have this adjacent condition, is that if you take a counter in the middle of a row, you really end up breaking a row into two separate, I'll say in quotations, row. Right? It's for all intents and purposes a new row. All right. So, kind of what I was talking about earlier is that the reason why I want to talk about this game is because we want to represent the problem differently, right? As you're solving this game, it's a huge pain to redraw out your diagram every single time. So we introduce some new notation to make it easier to look at, which in turn makes it way easier to solve. So we represent every position of the board by just a set of numbers. How many numbers determines how many rows there are, and the number itself determines how many counters are in that row. So the starting position is 3, 4, 5. Okay, and as we'll see, this notation definitely helps a lot. So when you're solving problems, don't be afraid to introduce new notation yourself, because that often can make things a lot easier. All right, so in this game, it turns out player 1 has a winning strategy. They take exactly 1 counter from the 5th row to split it up into a 1 and a 3. All right, and we can analyze what happens after this with this diagram. So here we're just going to use the numbers, right? So the starting position is 3, 4, 5. Player 1 moves it to 1, 3, 3, 4, as you can see up there, right? 1 on the bottom, 3 on the bottom, 3 on the top, 4 on the middle. All right, and we just sort of have to go through each one of player 2's many moves one at a time. All right, so case 1, if they take that 1, player 2 will respond and make this thing 5 ones and a 4. It's not obvious why this is a losing position right now, but we'll go through all of the responses to this right now, and you'll see that this is really what you want to do. All right, let's see. So let's look at if they take that 1 from the bottom row, we end up with 4 ones and 4. And from here, what you can do is you can take 2 from that middle row, right in the middle of the middle row. All right, so if you take 2 in the middle of the middle row, what happens is you get 6 ones. And at this point, I think it's clear that you will win, right? Every time they take 1, you take 1. They take 1, you take 1. Eventually, you're going to win. However, reducing it to 1, 1, 1, 1, 4 is not the only response they can do. They could have also, let me go back. All right, so they could have also taken those 2, get that. But at this stage, we can still get to 6 ones. Right? What else could they have done? They could have taken that 1 from the middle, but we can still get 6 ones from this position, right? By taking 2 in the middle row, right? Okay. What else could they have done? They could have taken 2 in the very center of the middle with 5 ones. But at this point, you don't even need to try to win. You just win automatically. Right? All right, what else could they have done? They could have taken 1 from the middle, 1 in the middle of the middle. But you just take that one. All right, and that's all the possible moves that they could have played out of 5 ones and 1 4. And so this really shows that this really was a losing position after all. What else? So let's go back to the very beginning, all right, with this 1, 3, 3, 4. What else could they have done out of this? They could have sent you to 3, 3, 4. But if they send you to 3, 3, 4, you can send them to 1, 1, 3. And I think at this point, it's clear that you can win from here, because this thing is symmetric. All right, everything they do, you can completely copy them, right? If they take 1 from the 3, you take 1 from the 3. If they take 2 from the 3, you take 2 from the 3. If they take a solo 1, you take the other solo 1. So again, we use this idea of symmetry, and we can just say right away that you win. All right, so going back to the beginning, what else could they have done? Right, they didn't, right? So instead of 3, 3, 4, they could have given you 1, 3, 3, 3. Yeah, 1, 3, 3, 3. But from here, you can still send them to that symmetric position. They could have given you 1, 1, 3, 4, but you can still send them back to the same symmetric position. They could have given you 1, 2, 3, 3. A bunch of them just go to symmetric, or allow you to follow up with a symmetric one. Right? Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, I think that deals with those opening moves. 2, 3, 4 we're not quite done with yet. What else they could do if they want to make it really hard on you? They could take 2. Well, I don't think this makes it too hard on you, because 2, 3, 3 you can make it into 3, 3, which is again a symmetric position, so you win. You can also make, they could have also made 3, 4, which you can make into a symmetric position. What else can they do? They can make 1, 3, 4, but from here you can make the last strange position, right? So we had a couple of strange positions. 1, 2, 3 is another losing position, which is a little bit strange. Another way you can get to 1, 2, 3 is if they give you 1, 2, 4. All right, so we're almost done. We're getting there. All we need to do is analyze 1, 2, 3. All right. So from 1, 2, 3, what could they do? They can give you 1, 2, 2. But from 1, 2, 2, you can put them in a symmetric position. All right. What else can they do? They can put you to 2, 3, which you can again bring them back to the same symmetric position. So that's not too bad. What else can they do? Send you to 1, 1, 2. But 1, 1, 2 is really easy because you can just send them to 1, 1. And lastly, I think there should be one more, or maybe not. Lastly, they can send you to 1, 3, which again you can send to 1, 1. All right. Let's see. Yeah, so there you're sending them to 1, 1. All right. And I think that should be, oh wait, there's one more. Okay, sorry, I forgot about that one. So this is the last one, right? 4 1s also, you take 1, they take 1, or sorry, they take 1, you take 1, etc. So those are the last 2 ways you can get to 4 1s. So coming up with a diagram like this it takes a lot of time, it's tedious, but once you finish it, once you get this really nice picture which completely explains the game. And you can, so if you have this diagram, you can always win, which I think is really nice. And so if you're actually playing with it but don't want to carry around this card, all you really need to do is remember what the losing positions are, right? So if you look at the highlighted ones, those are all you really need to remember. And as long as you can make those, or as long as you can figure out how to make those, eventually you're going to win. So really the main ones to memorize are just the 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5 1s and 1, 4, and of course the opening move. And so as long as you can just remember these guys, you should be able to win. And so being able to make a nice diagram like this is really important when analyzing games. I think this sort of just says exactly what I just said. Right? As long as you can move to a safe position, eventually you'll win. Yeah. All right, I think we're ready for game 6. So game 6 and game 7 are actually my favorite games out of all of these ones. I think these games are really, really cool, and I hope you'll agree with me by the end of this. Maybe you had fun playing them. So game 6, what we do is we have this 5x5 board with a bunch of blue counters, red counters. You place them on the board in a very particular way, kind of like a checkerboard with the center missing. And in this game, players take turns, right? So player 1 gets the blue counters, player 2 gets the red counters, and players take turns shifting a counter to an empty square until eventually somebody can't move and that player loses the game. So I think initially when I saw this game, I was kind of skeptical of whether or not this game would actually end. It looks like maybe if you play in a certain way, you can extend the game forever. That's not a good sign for a game, to be able to extend the game forever. But it turns out that with a really nice argument, you can show that the game does in fact eventually end. And so the way that we do this is, again, we employ this very common problem-solving technique of adding something to the game, adding something to the board, reimagining the board a little bit differently to really highlight things we probably would miss otherwise. So in this game in particular, right, remember how I mentioned that the pieces are arranged kind of like a checkerboard? So maybe in spirit of that, maybe this gives us our hint to color the board as a checkerboard. And so once we color like a checkerboard, a lot of things which were maybe mysterious initially can become very clear. So the first thing you might notice is that player 1 always moves a blue onto a red. Right? So I think there's an animation for that, if I remember. All right. I need to go to the next one. Yeah, so when it's blue's turn to move, they always move a blue onto a red, and red, right, so like that. And now red always moves a red onto a blue, right, by how the checkerboard works. And so because of this, we know that blue pieces always move onto red pieces always move onto blue pieces, which means that you can only ever move a red piece on a red square or a blue piece on a blue square, which means that as soon as you move a piece, that piece never gets touched again, right? It's impossible to move the same piece twice, is what this tells you. And this is really neat, right? So this is something that the checkerboard really helps to show, I think, very, very clearly, that I think is really hard to see without the checkerboard pattern. And so what this tells us is that because you can't move the same piece twice, it means that eventually the game does in fact end. All right, so that's the first tidbit that I think we need to talk about that before we talk about the solution. All right, so in this game, the red player can actually always win, or player 2 can always win. And so we do this by the second thing. So the first really cool thing that we did with this game was put it in a checkerboard. The second thing, which I think is not entirely obvious, it's not obvious at all, but we want to draw on these dominoes. So I don't know if you can kind of see it, but we partition. Yeah, I think you can kind of see it better on the middle one. But we partition the board into dominoes, except the middle square. And at this point, player 1 moves out of the domino, and what this means is that now player 2 is able to move into the domino. So player 2 always moves within dominoes, and player 1 always moves outside of the domino. What this means is that this means that player 2 is always guaranteed to move. Right? Every time player 1 moves out, they open up a space inside a domino for player 2 to move in. Since player 2 is always guaranteed to move, and since we know from previously the game eventually ends, we know that this is a player 2 game. Player 2 eventually will win as long as they play within their dominoes. All right. So that's it for that game. The second game is also, so this is, I don't know, tied for first with the other one as my favorite game. This one, we have this playing board, which is the 4x4 with a corner missing, and we have these kind of neat little tiles which we can play on the board, extending the path. All right, so players take turns placing chips, extending the path, and the player who sort of sends us overboard is the loser. So it means you can still wrap around existing pieces, but the first player to send us off of the board is the one that actually loses. So, yeah, so the one who runs over the boundary loses. And so this game, it turns out, is a player one win. All right, and it turns out that the winning move is to play into the board. All right, so if player one plays into the board, there's three options for player two, right? They can either play straight, they can play curve one way, or they can play curve the other way. The only three possible moves, and all we need to do is analyze each of these three cases. But again, maybe not obvious, so very much like the previous game, we can use dominoes, right? We can add some extra structure to the game to make things very, very clear. So we partition the remaining board into 5 dominoes, plus one sort of domino cut in half. So let's see, one split domino. Let's see if we can get it. So there we go. So we can see the board, right? We have 5 dominoes outlined in red, plus we have 2 black squares, and the 2 black squares really are supposed to be one domino connected by the line in the middle. We can do that for the other ones as well. We get 5 dominoes, 1 split domino, 5 dominoes, 1 split domino. And at this point, this strategy is very simple, right? All you have to do is play within the domino, right? You always send the path into the domino, right? Let's see, do I have another slide? I think I do. All right, yeah. So if you send the path into the domino, right, it means that player one, it means that you're safe, right? It always means that you're safe, but it means that player one has to move out of the domino, right? Player one moves out of the domino means that you have an opportunity to move back into the domino, which means, again, you always have a safe move, right? You always have a fresh domino to send your path into, and eventually you're going to run out of tiles, and eventually you're going to send the other person overboard. So again, just being able to draw this diagram really shows how to win very simply in a couple of lines. So it's really very, very elegant and very beautiful. All right, so that's it for game 7. I think we have, let's see how much time okay, just about. All right, yeah, so that just says, yeah. So we have one more game left over. Luckily, it's a pretty quick one. So we have 9 cards, labeled 1 through 9. Players take turns removing a card. The first player to have 3 cards that add up to 15 wins. So it's like that. So objective is to have 3 cards that add up to 15. Otherwise it's a draw. And again, so very similarly, if you remember game 2, what we did is we wrote out all the ways that you could win, and we're going to do the exact same thing here. All right, and it shows that this guy is actually also isomorphic to tic-tac-toe. Right, we draw out all the ways that you can add up to 15, and from this, we look at what numbers are used more frequently than others, and we can come up with a rearrangement that shows that this is exactly like tic-tac-toe, but it looks differently. So isomorphic to tic-tac-toe, which, as many of you know, ends in a draw. So, well, I think this is it that I have to talk about. Thank you for your time.